time for our next session. Up next is Ashu Ravichander. She is an engineer and product manager, currently principal product manager at Workday. And outside of her day job, she leads product for the Human Health Project, which is a nonprofit connecting patients with mental health and other chronic diseases to advocates that help them navigate the healthcare system. So welcome, Ashu.
Thank you, Andrea. Let me start screen share. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this talk, Writing the Highs and Lows, where I'll go over some of my techniques to navigating bad mental health days in the workplace. But first, introductions. Hi, I'm Ashu Ravichander, and I'm currently a principal product manager at Workday. I started out my career as an engineer in the healthcare space almost a decade ago now, and since then have built consumer and enterprise products for a wide variety of personas. On a personal note, I have 2 beautiful dogs and Boo, my cat, with my husband. Outside of work, I live in California now, so I love to kayak in the summers and ride bikes through the year. And I also have bipolar disorder, type 2 to be specific. Most of my friends and coworkers know the first 7 things about me, but not the last, because that is not something I ever speak about since it's not really well understood and is unfortunately so often conflated with your character and capabilities. Now, I have attended conferences and other events for the past decade now, and I have heard some amazing speakers. But I wish 23-year-old me could have heard more people talking about mental health in a tech or professional setting so that it felt more normalized and that I understood that it was just a difference and should never have been a reason to hold back. That's why I'm here today, to kind of do this for 23-year-old me and for anyone else that may need to hear it. Because statistically, I know I'm not alone. And you may not have a diagnosed mental health condition, but honestly, it's a spectrum. And we all have mental health. And some days it just does not fare as well, whether it's due to biochemical reactions, external stressors, thanks pandemic, or just being human. So I think this is important for everyone to hear and learn to build resiliency. Now, earlier, I used to compartmentalize my professional and personal self and never let it seep into the other. But this wasn't sustainable. And if I wanted to bring my full self to work, I had to positively integrate my condition in. Because I also have ambitious career goals, and I know I'm going to build amazing teams working on amazing products. So I started taking on a more mindful approach to work and making sure I had defenses up against any bad days. And that's what I want to talk to you all about today. I'm going to walk through my personal experience about how I build resiliency around bad mental health days at work. I'll go through 5 of the most basic and important things I have in my toolkit that help me be consistent and bring my best whenever I need to, and how I, and hopefully you, can use this to bring your whole self to work. I do want to also call out what this talk is not. None of these techniques are a substitute for care, whether it's self-care, meditation, medication, therapies. There are a lot of great resources out there, and I do recommend you seek this out. I have put years of work for myself into therapy and medication that has let me come to this point, to be here and talk to you all. And I'd be more than happy to connect on this offline. Along with seeking out care, I want to stress that you need to treat your physical and mental health the same and take the time off, take the mental health days off if you really need to. And finally, it is not a formula. I've had to develop what works for me over years of trial and error, and I'm sharing what has stuck. This could look very different for you, and I hope you take this as a starting point to build the tools that work for you. With that, let's jump into 5 simple tools I use to bring my best to work. Now, my first technique is to build a playbook of templates, frameworks to help give me a leg up on really low energy days. I'm a product manager, and we are the go-to people about our products, right? So quite often, I find that I have to turn around and create something like white papers or business cases for really different audiences in a very short time frame. But what do I do if this falls on a really low day for me, where my energy is not where it would normally be? I don't want to do a bad job just because the timing wasn't right. I knew I had to do something different to accommodate for this. So I looked at the most common things I might need on a daily or weekly basis and figured that if I had a template or a framework for these things, then I would always have great starting points for my most common deliverables. Think about it kind of like meal prep. On a weekday, after you've had this hard time at work, you've finished all your chores, you know you need to have a nutritious, balanced meal, but you just don't have the mental or physical energy to cook up anything elaborate. Well, if you do meal prep on the weekend and have some pre-prepared proteins and chopped and seasoned vegetables, then all you really have to do is heat it up, maybe add a really simple salad to it, and wow, you've got a great, nutritious meal ready. Well, the templates that I collect are kind of the same thing. So if I get asked to put a business case template together, I already have a starting point with my business case template. And you and I know that formatting is 50% of the work. So I already have a leg up. I also have notes, prompts, and questions on each of these to make filling it out easier, almost Mad Lib style. So for example, in my business case deck, I have a section on the success metrics, and I have a little prompt there that reminds me to detail out the product metrics and how that could tie into the organization's metrics or OKRs that they're tracking. So now when I need to fill it out, even if I'm having an off day, I'm making sure I cover the right points and details. Over the years, I have collected and continued to add what I need in my day-to-day work to my playbook. So far, I have a roadmap deck, feature requirement templates, business case decks, prioritization frameworks, and a few more things that I can lean on. I have also had the privilege of working with some amazing coworkers and teams in various organizations. So every time I see an impactful presentation or document, including some that we saw present in the conference earlier today, I constantly think about my playbook and either ask for a copy or adapt a template from it. I have a folder for my work computer with these samples and templates labeled with all the organization themes and branding. But I also make a generic and non-branded templates for myself to use with links to publicly available themes and icon collections and have it on my private Google Drive. So I know I can port this playbook with me. Next, I have what I like to call spacers. One thing I have learned from cycling through highs and lows is that everything passes. So it really helps me to buy some time or create spacers between me and the critical event or task till I can get back in that right state and have appropriate and reliable responses. So a few weeks ago, my dog, RB, he had surgery, and I think it was on a Wednesday. And I remember I was like a complete wreck that day. But I was still in a few meetings where I needed to make sure I had a handle on the project we're working on. I tried to be as present at the meetings, but since I knew it was going to be a high stress day, I asked for all meetings that day to be recorded. For meetings that I couldn't record, I had my transcription app open. So I had the whole meeting transcribed and had notes for myself. I spent the rest of the day doing less intense tasks, like I think I just sorted through some old data that I needed and replied to older emails. Then at around 6 p.m., the vet calls me and he tells me RB has made it through surgery just fine and was awake. I I finally felt like I could breathe and got back into that right state of mind. Now, I know there were some questions asked of me in the meetings and some follow-ups. So to make sure I didn't miss anything, I just replayed my meetings from the day at 2x speed, of course, and looked at the transcription so that I could catch up. Now, recording and transcriptions are a good way to build spacers, but there are other ways I do this too, depending on the situation, like shuffling around some of my tasks. So that I'm working on more routine or repetitive tasks when I'm stressed, and then the more important tasks later. Or, responding to infuriating emails only after I spend some time out watering my garden and having a think about it. I have a very well-watered garden, in case you were wondering. But it is a slippery slope between building a spacer and procrastination. I have seen this and experienced it. So I have had to make a sacred rule about maintaining a to-do list in a single spot, which I have to regularly review before starting another task. The bottom line here is find out what works for you, pause, prioritize, and come back to situations or tasks when you are ready. Now, the third technique I use is to ask for feedback early and often to almost have a reality check. I'm not going to lie to you, it's hard to ask for feedback. And I am still putting this into practice, but I know it has a big payout. So almost all the time when I'm in a depressive phase, I find that I'm putting myself down almost relentlessly. For example, recently, I forgot an edge case while writing product requirements, and someone pointed that out during a review. Now, my inner voice starts telling me that I'm a terrible product manager because I couldn't think of that edge case scenario up front, and that I'm probably not qualified for this job. Even though rationally, I know it's not possible to think of all edge cases that could possibly occur. And in fact, product requirements are a collaborative effort that grows and improves with feedback. And maybe my multiple engineering degrees and a decade of releasing successful enterprise scale products may say otherwise. However, this constant cycle of thoughts really magnifies the imposter syndrome. And what I've found breaks the cycle is having factual evidence or conversations to overcome it. For me, especially at the start of new jobs or new projects, when I am still working on getting up to speed or we're in the storming phase of the project, I find that I'm a lot harder on myself about not being further along. And the imposter syndrome is on high gear. And almost always, the people around me recognize that the reality is that we are in the storming phase of the project and that it's normal and we'll get better with collaboration. Or that it's only been 2 months since I joined, so it's actually okay to not know as much. So I ask for feedback early in these cases so that I'm being grounded and have a better pulse on reality versus what the imposter syndrome is telling me. Now, it is important to get feedback from the right people. Just because someone is on the same project as you doesn't automatically make them a great person to get feedback from. For me, these have to be people I have a great professional relationship with. I know that they know me, and I feel comfortable asking and really discussing their opinions. I also prepare what I want to get feedback on, because it is important to know why you want feedback and what you're going to do with it. Is it a specific action on a project, or your working style with a team, or something else? Vague questions give you vague answers. So take the time to prepare the questions to make this meaningful. I also know I need to wait for the right time when I know I'm in a good place mentally to accept the feedback and not be defensive about it. And the last thing I'll leave you with on this topic is a reminder to accept positive feedback. Earlier, I used to spend most of my time reviewing my feedback and focusing only on the negatives because these are areas I could take action on to improve. And I would completely gloss over anything positive since my reviewer probably didn't mean it, or they were just saying it to be nice, or that there was really nothing actionable for me there. But now I know it is so important to focus on the positive so that you know what's working and what strengths you have that you can lean into more. So seek and accept positive feedback. Now, this next technique is a more recent discovery for me, and I can tell you it has absolutely been redeeming already. You may have heard this before, assume positive intent. Practicing this a few times has already helped me so much that I know this one will stick in my toolkit for a long time. So on certain days with interpersonal interactions, I'm sensitive and sometimes read too much into things. Like, why does my coworker hate me just because they said something contradictory or spoke over me in a meeting? There was a time this would have upset me so much that I'd be crying in a bathroom stall over it. Now, as a bottom line, I just assume everyone I interact with at work has positive intent. It helps me not be angry or annoyed over it, but look at it situationally. So in the case where someone interrupts me in a meeting, I'm now thinking that you just interrupted me to say something, not because you wanted to cut me off, but because you had something to say that felt unheard. Okay, with this context in my mind, I'm going to repeat what you said so you know that I hear you, and then go on to the point I was making. In an organization, especially one with great culture, you very rarely meet actual bad players. Instead, if in a conversation or project, if we have that common goal understood, it's easier to assume that everyone has positive intentions to work towards that common goal, albeit in different ways. It's usually not personal or malicious attacks. So remember your common goals and assume everyone works towards it with positive intentions. Now, I saved this one for the last because for me, one of the bigger challenges I faced in the workplace with my disorder is the disproportionate reaction to certain situations on certain days. It could be as simple as someone pointing out a mistake I made or getting some not so positive feedback. Either of these simple interactions could have resulted with me breaking down into tears when I got home or sinking into depression. This kind of extreme reaction is hard to deal with when you now have to get on with the rest of your day and go into a 3-hour grooming session with your engineering team. What has really helped me here is finding a few key people who are my anchors and help ground me and rationalize my thought process. A simple conversation or text with my anchors where I describe a certain situation helps me understand what a rational response would look like from their perspective versus how my brain might be exaggerating it. And this really helps center me. The one thing I must caution you about here is the fact that this can be extremely exhausting for the people you reach out to. Be mindful of that and make sure you have a few different trusted people that you can talk to so you can load balance it without draining any one single person. But don't hold back on reaching out to people. And if you don't get a response, move on to someone else if it's important for you to talk to someone at that time for that scenario. For me, if all else fails, I still text my mom and she replies back, so that's a great thing. Put in effort into these relationships, and I always look to find ways to give back to the wonderful anchors that hold me steady. Well, that's my toolkit. To quickly recap what I have. Firstly, playbooks that I have built over time to give me great starting points. Second, spacers that help me pause and come back to a task when I'm ready. Third is feedback to cut the imposter syndrome in the bud and help me reinforce what I'm good at and what I can work on. Fourth is assuming positive intent that can help move us all towards a common goal. And finally, fifth, my trusted circle of anchors that I can rely on. Those were 5 of the more important tools I have in my toolkit. And even though I use these tools almost daily, I know it still needs very intentional practice for it to be useful. And please know that you are not alone. Ever since I posted that I was going to talk about this, I was worried whether being this open and vulnerable would impact my career, but it's had the opposite effect. I've had so many people reach out to share their stories. These are women who are founding companies, and someone else I met who's had a really hard time with her mental health, but is still so very successfully leading a large channel for one of the biggest companies in the world. There are many people with these invisible struggles who are flourishing and building beautiful products. We just need to work differently. I'd love to hear your thoughts, more about your tools, or maybe just connect on LinkedIn. Thank you and happy Women's Day.
Wow, Ashu, that was amazing. I felt like you were talking about me. Thank you so much for your amazing talk on managing mental health at work. I know from the comments, a lot of people really resonated with your tips and tricks, specifically because you gave so much context into what the actual problem was that you were looking to solve.